Alright, good morning guys. So we are going to start off today by drawing a very simple room in 1-point perspective. So we've already learned how to draw boxes and cubes and letters in 1-point perspective. So now we're going to take it the next step further by drawing, instead of the outside of a cube, we're going to draw the interior spaces of a cube. If you think about a room, it's simply like you've taken the front face of the cube off and you've stepped inside of it. So we're going to be looking at the back wall or the back face and have the two side walls and the ceiling and floor. So it's going to be like we're inside of a giant box. So in your sketchbook on a new piece of paper, open it up and turn your paper horizontally. You can write your name on the back if you would like. And to start off with, what we're going to do is create somewhere here within the middle of this piece of paper, we're going to make a box that is about 4 inches wide and 3 inches tall. It doesn't have to be exactly that size, but that just sort of gives you a good kind of guesstimate. But we want it to be located about in the middle of that whole page. So there is 4 inches wide, making sure that line is nice and horizontal. About 3 inches tall on both sides, nice and vertical lines. And if you've done that correctly, it should match up to be 4 inches wide on the bottom. Now what this box is going to represent is that back wall in a room. So now we're going to determine where our vanishing point is, and we will be omitting the horizon line just because we don't have to have that for this picture. So if you remember, the horizon line does represent your eye level. Anything above your eye level you see the bottom of, anything below you see the top of. If I were sitting in a room, my eye level might be about here somewhere. And then for my vanishing point, that determines how far left or right you are. If I'm sitting on the right side of the classroom looking forward, it might be way over here. If I'm in the middle of the room, or if I'm way over here on the left side. So since we're creating a make-believe room, I'm just going to sort of pick a random spot, let's say about here, to make that my vanishing point. But it does need to be contained inside of this square. Now, from that vanishing point, we're going to create the walls and the ceiling and floor now. So I'm going to take the corners of my square and line them up with my vanishing point. Here to here. And from this corner, I'm going to draw my line outward and away from my vanishing point and take it all the way off the page. Like that. Now for the next corner, if I line it up with the vanishing point's here. I'm not going to draw a line. There's the corner. And then from the corner out, I'm going to draw that vanishing point, that diminishing line. Third corner, vanishing point, corner, line all the way out, and fourth corner. Now, notice how we can tell, because my vanishing point is not right in the center, I put it off to the left a little bit. You can tell by looking at this, the left wall looks a little bit more skewed and a little bit more foreshortened than the right wall. The right wall looks a little bit more normal. But that's a basic setup for an interior room space. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to create things that lay flat against a wall. We're going to create a window and some picture frames and some basic things like that, a doorway. So we're going to do this together. You can pause this video and rewind until you feel like you've gotten this, and you can build your drawing up with me as we go. So I'm going to start on this back wall by creating a window. Since the back wall, notice, is made up of vertical and horizontal lines only, my window is going to be the same type of line work. It is not foreshortened. Everything we're seeing is flat and straight on. So I'm going to create, windows are usually pretty tall. going to create a nice little opening rectangle for my window using only vertical and horizontal lines. And have a nice big window in my house. Like that. Now, we can get a little bit fancier. We can add a few more details. We can add some molding around the window. I can create a little border to have some molding and make it just a little bit wider. Like that. Then inside the window I can create window panes for it. I'm going to do just a standard window that has a little half bottom section that will slide up to open the window. So I'm going to create one line horizontally across and drop down and do, that's a little bit high. Maybe I should move that down a little bit. Make it about here, there, and then I'm going to do another line just to give it some thickness so it's got some depth. I can create like the little window turn thing on the top, and that's a very, very basic window. You could, if you wanted to, put the little window panes in there, but we'll leave it like that for now. So that's a window that's laying flat against the wall on the back. But now let's figure out how would we draw a window on one of the side walls where it's foreshortened. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is to keep this window consistent. You obviously don't want one window really small in your house and one really big. I'm going to very, very lightly take the top of my window and super lightly bring it across to the corner of the wall. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom, very lightly, and the same thing for the crossbar of my window. Now, when these lines, when we bring them across horizontally, when they hit this corner and they turn and start moving up this wall, they will become like the top and the bottom edge. They'll become diminishing lines. So if I line up the top edge where it hits the corner, line it up with my vanishing point, I can bring this out and forward. And so you can see how it feels like that line turns and follows up the wall. If I do this with each of them, vanishing point, corner, up and out, vanishing point, corner, up and out, that's helping me maintain the same size consistently throughout the room. So now I'm going to decide where I'd like to have my second window, and I think I might put him, I don't know, way up here towards the front. So I'm going to drop in a nice vertical line, and you can see how much bigger this window looks compared to that one. But it's because this one is so much closer to us, its perspective makes it bigger the closer it is to us. And since it's on a foreshortened wall, I'm going to keep it narrower than this window by just a little bit, so it gives the appearance of it being foreshortened. Then I'll darken these lines. At the top and bottom. Now I took these lines from the outside of the frame of this back window. So now what I'm going to do is create the interior portion as well. So I'm going to start with my vertical lines, and I'm not going to take it all the way down. I'm going to leave a little gap. Then the bottom of these windows, those lines are now diminishing. They're no longer horizontal. So I'm going to change the direction and make those diminishing. diminishing, diminishing, and vertical. So now that has the little frame of this window made. I can then create the middle bar, and since it's on a tilted wall now, it will now be diminishing as well. So there's the top line coming from the vanishing point. There's the bottom line coming from the vanishing point. But this time, if I'm going to find in the middle and put that like little knob, I kind of need to figure out where that is on this. If I put it right in the very center with the equal width on the left and the right, because this window is tilted, that's technically not the center. So, in linear perspective, there's a very important rule on how you find the middle of any plane that's foreshortened and is going to a vanishing point. And that rule is if you take the corners, the opposite corners of a plane, and crisscross them, and then crisscross the other two opposite corners, that will find the exact center of that plane. So I'm going to match up this corner with this one, and I'm just going to very, very lightly put in a little cross mark in the middle. Then I'll match up this corner with this one, and very lightly put a little crossbar in the middle. I don't take it all the way to the corners just because that's a lot to erase later. But where those two lines meet, that X shape in the middle, that tells me the exact center of that whole plane. So right above that point is where the middle will be for me to create my little knob to open my window. That's going to be a really important thing when it comes to drawing our library linear perspective drawing from observation as our major project for this unit. So now we have a window on a back wall that's not foreshortened and a window on a side wall that is foreshortened. So now we're going to move over and we're going to create a doorway on this other wall. So perhaps this doorway will open up into another sort of adjoining room in this house. So I'm going to create, we'll put it back here towards the back, a nice true vertical for the back edge of the door, and I'm going to bring it all the way down to the floor and determine how tall I want that doorway to be. Now since it's on a wall that's diminishing or foreshortened to the vanishing point, I'm going to line this top edge up with my vanishing point here, and I'm going to extend it forward to make the width of the door. I'm going to decide how wide I want it to be and then drop down a vertical, and again I'm always comparing it to the edge of my paper to make sure my verticals are true, and that's going to be the other side of that doorway. Now we can make this look a little bit fancier. We can add a frame around it the same way we did with our windows. So I can create another vertical line at the top. I can create another diminishing line that's coming from my vanishing point, and another one. Now notice I'm going to make this front edge a little bit wider than the back edge because this is closer to us. By just a hair, I'm going to make it a smidge wider, and that will give the illusion that this is closer and bigger and that is further and smaller. So that's a doorway sort of framed in. But now what we can do is give the illusion that this opens up into another room. If this were a closed door, I would just add a door handle and be done. But since this is going to open up into another room, I'm going to erase the floor line right in between those door posts. So that way the floor will then continue as it moves over into that other room. Now, as of right now, what I have is a paper thin wall. If you notice, there's no thickness to it. So I want to give this some depth. So if this wall is going to come and then turn and have a thickness, sort of like the thickness of a door jamb, when it makes that turn, it will become, again, a horizontal line, just like the back wall. So I'm going to find a nice true horizontal, comparing it to the edge of my paper and that back floor wall there. And at the bottom of the door, I'm going to make a little short horizontal line for the thickness. And then I'm going to slide up to this top corner as well and make another little horizontal line for the thickness. If I drop in a vertical connecting them, I now have a nice thickness to that wall, so it's not paper thin. That way it's got room for all of the insulation and all the 2x4s and all that stuff that builds up to create a wall. Now, what we should have at this door jamb is we should be able to see the underside of that part there. So I'm going to line my vanishing point up with this little corner. And I'm going to fill it in from that corner up until it disappears. And now we have a completed door jamb. We can see the interior wall and the interior ceiling part. Once we have that, we should then technically be able to see the other room. So if these two rooms are lined up in space, one room right next to another, we should be able to see the back wall of this room through that doorway. So what I'm going to do is take this bottom line for my back wall, line it up again, and then fill this in my doorway. That creates the illusion that that back wall continues into the next room. Now, depending on how tall your doorway is, we're going to do the same thing for the ceiling. I'm going to line up my ceiling, top horizontal line, and if the doorway doesn't block it, you might be able to see that top line continuing into the other room as well. And I think that gives it a really nice sort of three-dimensional quality. So that's a way that you can draw a lot of things that lay flat against the wall in a room like this. You can add paintings. So I'll let you choose. You can put a painting right here, or I've left some space here. Let's see. Let's make a little frame. Let's put a poster on the wall. This wall will have a vertical. The top and bottom will diminish from the vanishing point. Bottom and top. And then it'll be cut off in the front with a vertical. I could add a frame around that. I could take the time to turn that into a nice little scene. I can draw some mountains. I don't know, maybe some clouds. Maybe this is a pretty landscape on the wall. Maybe there's a nice like little river flowing. And then I have a cool little poster. But the rule is that the top and bottom of anything on a foreshortened wall, the top and the bottom has to go to the vanishing point. A lot of times I see students that will just start making random lines that are tilted in different directions, trying to draw what they think looks correct. But remember, in one-point perspective, you only have 3 types of lines. You are going to have vertical to represent height, horizontal to represent width, and diminishing lines going to the vanishing point to represent depth. You will never have a point where you just have a random angle anywhere in a drawing in one-point perspective. So I should be able to go back through every line that you've drawn and take my ruler and follow every line around and make sure that everything is diminishing correctly. So if I check the left side, everything comes from my vanishing point. That's extremely important. The next thing that we'll do, because this is also pretty easy, we'll add a little area rug here in the middle of this floor. The floor is a foreshortened wall, just like the left and the right side. So I'll start with a horizontal line towards the back where I want my rug to start. Say about there looks good. And then as that rug comes forward towards us, it's going to, just like the sides of this wall, go to the vanishing point. So I'm going to line this end up with my vanishing point, and I'm going to bring this rug forward. I can let it come off the page, or I can let it stop if I want to end it on the page. And then I'll do the same thing for this side. Line it up with the vanishing point, bring it forward, and if I want to leave this on the page, I can stop, and I would cut it off with another horizontal. That way I have a nice little area rug. The next thing that we're going to do is add ceiling tiles. Now this is going to be kind of a tricky thing, so if you struggle with this, don't panic. You can pause and re-watch this and go very step by step with me. But to create the ceiling tiles, we have to figure out a way to mathematically make those diminish and get smaller as they move back in space. So the ones up here at the top should be bigger, and as they move towards the back of the room, they should get smaller because they're moving away from us. So what I'm going to do to start this is we're going to line our ruler up with the top edge of the wall, and I'm going to line my 0 on my ruler up right there, and I made my wall 4 inches wide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little baby tick mark at about every ½ inch interval all the way up to that other corner. That's going to give us the basis to help us start a ceiling tile. This is also the same thing that you would do if you were creating tiles on a floor as well. Now from each one of those marks, they're all exactly a ½ inch apart. I am going to line each one of them up with my vanishing point with my first tick mark, and bring that up and all the way off my paper. Vanishing point with the next tick mark, up and off, the next, and the next. And what you'll notice is that these start to radiate. They're going to start to kind of look like sun rays. Now, I just happen to choose a ½ inch increment for the width for these. You could, in theory, make as many of these as you want. You could do these every ½ inch or whatever, but just for ease, so we're all kind of consistent, we'll make them every ½ inch. Now this sort of gives the appearance that we have like wood tile, very sort of long wood panels going back on that ceiling. Now we're going to turn these in from long segments into little divided segments so they look like they're tiles. So this is the only time you will use a random angle in this drawing. This is not a diminishing line. What I'm going to do is line my ruler back up with this top left corner of that back wall, and then I'm going to find a random low angle If I make it really steep, my squares are really big. But if I make it nice and low, they'll look more realistic. And this is a totally random angle. I am making this up. It is not diminishing. But from this corner, what I'm going to do is make a little dot every time this random angle intersects one of these diminishing lines on the ceiling. Just a little baby tick mark all the way over to the edge of the wall. So you can kind of see those little tick marks kind of going up this way. Now, based on those tick marks, that is a way of mathematically giving us the perfect amount of foreshortened tiles. So from this very first lowest tick mark that I've made, I'm going to find it, match it up with a perfect horizontal, and I'm going to bring a horizontal all the way across my ceiling. And that makes my first row of tiles. I'm going to find the second little tick mark, find another horizontal, and bring it all the way across the ceiling. And you can see that now it's going to start to look like actual ceiling tiles. I don't recommend that you slide your ruler up this way, because that ends up covering up your lines, and they'll start to get a little bit crooked as you go up, and you'll realize the more you do, the more crooked it will become. So I like to draw on the underside of my ruler, so I can really compare and make sure everything works. Now if I take the third tick mark, slide up to the fourth, slide up to the fifth, help up in that line, you're going to see that these actually start to look like ceiling tiles that are getting bigger as they are coming forward. They should be gradually getting taller as they come towards you. And you can look at our classroom ceiling tiles as a great example of what this looks like. And then my last one is right over here on this very far right edge of the ceiling. Oop. So I'll add that one in. Now you may ask, well, that's great, but what do we do with the extra space that's left above? There's a cool way that we're going to do that in order to continue those lines coming forward. I'm going to start again over here on the left, and I'm going to count back 1 horizontal line, 2, and 3. And I'm going to make a little dot just so I remember where that is. Then I'm going to move over to the second diminishing line, and I'm going to count back 1, 2, and make a little dot. And then I'm going to go to the third diminishing line, and I'm just going to put a little dot on the first one. So I started here and went back 1, 2, 3, here 1, 2, here the first one. Now those 3 little dots, if I line my ruler back up with them, notice they're in a nice neat like little row. That should mathematically be the same angle but in perspective of the very first one that we made. So if I match up those 3, I can then continue and make tick marks at each of the other intersections for each of those diminishing lines. And that's basically taken that first angle of tick marks and translated it up here. Now I have more lines that I can then match up to continue my horizontals. And that's how you would bring that all the way up and off your page. Now that entire ceiling is tiled, and you can see that they really do get taller, and as they move back, they get shorter and shorter and shorter. And that's how you draw that incorrect, accurate perspective. So right now what we have is a room full of things that lay flat against the walls. Nothing we've made so far protrudes or comes out away from the wall. So we're going to find somewhere, and hopefully you may have some room right here if you've drawn yours like mine. We're going to create a very, very simple little shelf together. We're going to start off by having it look like a dresser, and then we're going to take the front face off and turn it into what looks like a very simple bookshelf. So I'm going to come over here close to my window, and I'm going to create from the floor up a vertical line. Now I'm not going to make mine very tall since I need to have room to fit it underneath that poster I made. I'm going to make it about that tall. So from the floor up a little ways. And this is going to represent where if you take a dresser and you push it up against the wall, this is the back edge of that furniture. Now in order to make it come out away from the wall, what I'm going to do is line up the bottom with a horizontal. Always double check that your horizontals are horizontals. And I'm going to bring it forward however far away from the wall I want it to come. I'm not going to make mine super deep, just horizontally about there. And then I'll do the same thing with a horizontal line at the top. If I end those with a vertical, I now have what looks like a rectangle just sticking straight out of the wall. I can erase this part if that's confusing for you to see to make that look solid. And this is basically the side of a dresser, and now we have to turn it into a cube or a box of some sort. So just like in our 1-point perspective boxes, I'm going to take my corners, those 3, and I'm going to take those to my vanishing point. So I'm going to line that bottom corner up with my vanishing point. And I'm going to bring this back, but I'm not going to take it all the way. I'm just going to take it back a little ways and stop. Kind of however wide I think that dresser should go in that room. I don't want to take it out past that wall, or else it'd be a little bit of an optical illusion. Then I'll take the second corner, line it up with my vanishing point and take it back a little ways too. And my third corner. Like that. So now we can start to see the side that would have like the drawers, and then we can start to see the top of this as a new little box. Now to cut this off at the back, remember whatever happens at the front happens at the back. So I have a vertical, so I'm going to slide that vertical back and cut that off. I can erase this back line that runs through it. And then at the front here, we have a horizontal. So from this back corner, I'm going to take my horizontal from that corner back and erase anything extra. And now I have what looks like a box that's sitting in this room. Now, if I would like to add some dresser drawers to this, if I want to create maybe a 3-dresser drawer, chest of drawers, I might put a division here and a division there. Those lines will also go to my vanishing point. 1 and 2. Now if this were a closed dresser, I would add some knobs, some handles, so that way I could open it up. But now what I'm going to do is, instead of leaving it like a closed dresser, I'm going to pretend that this is actually a shelf where I have shelf layers that I can add books to. So from this back corner, back here, that we have created with this horizontal line meeting this diminishing line, I'm going to line my ruler up with a vertical with that back corner. Now, it'll match this vertical. So from here, I'm going to skip the top because that top is solid, and I'm going to draw a line down a little ways, and then I'm going to skip to the next line and draw a line down a little ways, and then I'm going to skip to the next line and draw down a little ways. That's going to create the interior back corner of this bookshelf. So the next thing I have to do is now I'm going to take this, where this diminishing line hits the back corner here, and since it's horizontal at the top, from that corner I'm going to line up a horizontal line and bring it over to meet up with that vertical. And that's going to start to look like the top of a shelf. So this vertical should meet this horizontal. Now from this corner, I'm going to make a line that goes from the vanishing point. So I'm going to line that corner up, and this will be the back bottom edge of our shelf. Here to this corner, and fill it in there. And now you can see that actually looks like a shelf I could go and set a row of books on. So I'm going to do that for the other two shelves here as well. I'm going to go from this corner, line up a horizontal, bring it over here to that vertical, erase if you have any extra, and then from this new corner, I'm going to line that up with the vanishing point and make that back bottom edge. Same thing for this one, horizontal, erase anything extra, and then match the vanishing point up with that new corner. And this should actually be that first wall line that you erased again. And that is the new back edge. Now, I did not take the time to go into showing you how to make these shelves have thickness, or the outer walls of this bookshelf have a thickness to it. That's a little bit more time consuming and a little bit more detailed than I want us to go into right now. We will learn how to do that, but at a later date. So that is the basis of how to draw a room in 1-point perspective.